Hello and welcome to Fantasy Grounds College presents Fantasy Grounds Unity A through Z. I am founder Laerun from Fantasy Grounds College. Today we'll be covering the NPCs tab. If you're wondering what theme I'm using, it is the standard theme, although this is the new and updated version of Fantasy Grounds, which has a whole new look to it. For most of you that use Fantasy Grounds, you'll notice that there's some slight changes here. I made a video last night previously for discussing these changes. So if you have any questions about that, subscribe to our channel. And if you watch the short video I made, it goes over the changes. So for right now, we're going to focus on the NPC tab, which is over on the right. And this is where all your non-playing characters, monsters, and even traps or vehicles would be started to they'd be stored here. So normally I run this show at 4 p.m. on Fridays or Sundays, excuse me. This is kind of a makeup video because I've had trouble with my computer. And what I had found out is that I had the wrong video drivers, which made a huge difference. And also with the new optimized Fantasy Grounds, it's much easier to do the show. So here I am once again for NPCs. That's our topic. So basically, when we try to utilize NPCs, they'll go into an encounter, or some of you might actually put it on the combat tracker. It can be quite complex and daunting at first if you want to build your own. So I'm going to try to demystify some of that, some of those issues that you might come across when you are trying to create your own content. So I think initially I'm going to start with this anatomy, which is basically going to break down the different sections of the NPC stat block. The anatomy of this isn't as important as knowing all the little ifs, ands, and buts, but it's kind of a nice overview to get you started. So basically, the stat blocks, which I have an example here, they're normally locked if you get them from like the SRD or from an official source. So like this one here, if I wanted to change the token, I can't at this level anyways. I can do it on the encounter level, but I can't change it here. So what I'd have to do is find a way to unlock it. It's read only. So the best way to do that is when you have your NPC banner open, and I just happen to have it filtered to Acolyte, because that's the example I'm going to use. You want to take this pin or this shortcut that's right to the left of the word Acolyte, just left click and hold the mouse button and then just drop it back in. And at this point, you'll have a copy. So it's no longer attached to whatever source it is. It's going to be a copy of whatever the former book was. It'll make a copy of this. And now that I have a copy, I can actually edit this. So I'm going to close this one that's copyright protected. And I'm going to bring this one to the foreground here. And what I have is the stat block. And this is a spellcaster. I chose this one because it shows a pretty good variety of the different fields. So moving along, you have your main data in these red cells. So I'm going to unlock this so you can see. So now it's unlockable, or you're able to unlock it. And if you wanted to, you could switch the token out. So I'm going to go ahead and cover that since that's something that people try to do. Now you can change tokens at the encounter level. So if you open up an encounter, you can actually change the main token in the encounter, and that changes all the tokens for the encounter, but it doesn't change the main token. So that may be something you want to try before worrying about which tokens are going to go to which. The other thing is, if you really want a permanent token for that type of character, then you will supply one. Normally it'll have a letter or a number or something like that, unless you have a specific rule set or you've built your own, or it's a fancy art asset that you have for a specific rule set. So if you go to assets, which is where all of your content is stored, especially your module artwork or tokens or portraits or anything like that. So I'm going to go to tokens, which is by default where it stays. And it has a memory thing here where if you have a search token function, it'll keep that search memorized. That's a new feature, which I really like. So I'm going to go to data, which is the higher level of Fantasy Grounds in the back end. If it has rule set or campaign, it's more specific to your particular session. So if I double clicked on the bag looking icon, which takes me now to a deeper level in the data folder. Now these are all different sorts of tokens that I've collected. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at Bernardo Hasselman's tokens. These are third party. So I've double clicked on there and I'm going to go look for, it says any race, but I'm going to look for like a human cleric. So I'm going to come through here and I know I've had these organized by race and such. So I'm going to double click on humans. And these are all the different choices that I have. And don't forget you have this arrow that'll take you to the next page. So I'm going to look through here and find a nice kind of cleric looking token that might fit this particular bill. So as I go through, I'm just going to grab one of these and drag and drop it onto the sheet and replace the current one. The one that's on there now is kind of a default one that comes with Fantasy Grounds. So I want to find one that looks more like a priest or some kind of spellcaster. So I have one here is a male human spellcaster, more likely a wizard. So I'll see if I can find something a little more suitable. And it looks like I'm pretty much, let's see, Viking spellcaster. Let's try this guy. So he's human, and it looks like he has a little staff or something. So I'm going to use this guy. And I drag and drop him up here. So now I have a custom token for this particular character. So on the anatomy sheet, the token is to the far right, and this would be basically your choice if you wanted to change those. Like I said, you might see it blank or it might have a letter token. If you want to replace any of those, you can do so if you unlock the NPC sheet. So that's one thing I wanted to show you. That's the beginning. You have this non-ID name. So in this main data area, you have all this stuff filled out. So I'm going to put a robed man or something like that as a non-ID name. So we don't know his name. We don't know he's an acolyte. We might assume he's a spellcaster, but the acolyte is his main title. However, if you've never seen him before, you don't identify with him, then you can click on this ID button here, and that changes it to red. And then once you lock it, when you put it in an encounter or on the combat tracker, the name Robed Man comes up instead of the actual name. So I'm going to unlock this. I'm going to call this guy Johan or some kind of Scandinavian name. Yeah, let's call him Jan or something like that. His name is Janvar, so he's a healer. So Janvar is a priest of some sort. And in parentheses, I might put acolyte just so I remember what the base was. I mean, obviously, you can put whatever you want, but I just did that for the heck of it. And you don't even have to do that. That's just a suggestion. So now with this non-ID on there, it will show Robed Man instead of the actual title. When you get to know who he is, or you recognize him, then you can ID these things in the combat tracker. So that's kind of a cool feature. All right, so he is medium because he's a humanoid. It says here type humanoid, any race. So I'm going to go ahead and just type human in there. Now this stuff is more informational. It doesn't, this particular thing, it does matter as far as like creature type, but as far as mechanics go, maybe more for sorting or for special spells that affect certain types of creatures. But this is mainly informational, so the human part isn't much, but the humanoid part is. So the stuff in parentheses is kind of ignored, but it's more of a notation. And it says any alignment. So in most games, you don't leave that there. So let's go ahead and give them an alignment. I think I'm going to go with neutral good. And he doesn't have any armor. Let's say he's wearing some padded or leather armor. We'll say padded. So again, this is a descriptive area. The actual number is going to be like 11. So we gave him a little bit more armor class, and all I'm really doing is modifying an existing NPC stat block to suit my needs. This is the easiest way to create NPCs instead of starting completely over. Doing that from scratch takes a long time, and you have to know all the syntax and all this stuff. It's better to have an example in front of you, I think, especially in the beginning when you're first learning. This will be invaluable. So the next thing is, if this is a spellcaster, we don't have to have a big strength, but I'm going to give him +1 all the way across. Because he's human, that's normally what a character would get. So now he's 11, all the way through, except for his wisdom and his charisma. So these are his stat block adjustments. Obviously, you can put whatever you want in here. And then for hit points, this 2d8 is basically his hit die. So he's basically like a level and a half. He's not quite second level, but he's close. So 2d8, and then this is like an average, supposedly, of 2d8. So the 16 would be the highest, and the lowest would be 2. So this 9 is kind of an average rounded up. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give him a few more hit points, and maybe just a few, like maybe up to 11. Actually, I'll go with 13. So he has more of a better chance to survive, and just with a few points makes a difference. His speed is 30, so that kind of just gives you a descriptive text of how much his movement is. I don't think it affects the game too much, other than maybe your movement on the maps. So that's the main data, which is this red area. And then we'd already covered the title and some of the tokens and such. So now the secondary data is this armor class and such, which we've touched, and the hit points and the speed. So those are more combat / mechanical things. And then, of course, our stats are part of that secondary data. The next area is the other traits, or the tertiary data, which is, if you have saving throw bonus, if you have medicine or any of the skills, if you have vulnerabilities. His passive perception is 12, which is still accurate. It says any one language, usually common. So I'm going to change it to common and dwarvish. So that's pretty much it for this. If I wanted to give him another skill, let's see, he has medicine and religion. I'm going to give him one other, maybe insight. So when you start typing in here, it actually autofills. Of course, it's separated by a comma, so that's important. So I gave him insight +2. That way you can read body language and tell if you're lying and that sort of thing. And it's based on charisma, so that kind of makes sense. If he had a saving throw, more than likely it'd be a wisdom saving throw. So I would just go like +2 on wisdom. So that's something that you can add or take them away, whatever you want to do to customize it. He doesn't have any vulnerabilities, resistances, damage immunities, or condition immunities. But he does have his perception. He has specific languages now. His challenge rating might go up a tad depending on his stats and such, and his armor class and his hit points. So I think for right now, I'm going to raise it up to 60. I'm just guessing on that. There is a formula to come up with the challenge ratings and the different experience points. It's kind of a convoluted process, but you need some tools and some know-how to to get a closer number. There's a lot of different resources online that actually give you the the formula and how to calculate that. Fantasy Grounds will keep track of it at the NPC level, so when you build an encounter, it will add up all this stuff and give you your new challenge rating. But as far as the NPCs themselves, you either use what's given or you adjust them slightly depending on how you modify this character. In the traits, this particular character has a spell casting trait. He's wielding a club, so I'm going to change that to a mace. And we might add a shield or something to his armor class. So we could say padded plus shield. So it just says shield, comma, padded. And that would raise it to 13. So we're going to assume he has a shield. I'm going to go over the spellcasting statement because this is a very important piece of creating content, especially for spellcasters. It's a little confusing at first. And then, of course, you have your actions, which are any number of things. But in this case, he has a club action, and of course, he has spellcasting. But that's more of a trait, and the actions are more like more combat type related things or powers or special effects. So right now, he has a club. So I just retitled it, and I'm going to modify the numbers below. So nothing changes here except for the damage. The damage type is the same. The 2-hit is the same. The reach, the number of targets. But I want to change the hit number and the die. Right now it says hit 2, 1d4. I've just altered it to say hit 4, 1d6. So what that hit number is a static number that you can change in Fantasy Grounds. So if you go to the options and you go down to where the NPC damage is, you can change basically how much damage they do. So you can have it roll the 1d6 and add the modifiers, or you can just have a constant number. And the benefit of that is if you want to, right now it's on variable, but if you go on fixed, it will basically use that hit number. So every time he hits with his mace, it'll always do 4 points of damage. That's a good thing probably at first level, so you can kind of control the battle a little bit more. You don't have these swings of damage in there. So that's the reason for that hit number. So now you have a hit number of 4, which is 3 rounded up to 4. So whenever you're making the hit number, if it's, in an odd number and it's in the middle, you round it up. So that's kind of how they work that. And it's in favor of the damage, of course. So those are just some basic things that you can do just modifying your character. So let's say if you had this as your template and this was your new creature, you can technically create another action and copy this information. So this is a mace, so I'm going to add the mace from this character over, and you can modify this, if it's slashing or if it's piercing, and then of course if you have range difference or damage type, you change that. So as you see, it turns light blue. That means it's parsing, which is what you want to see. I'm just going to put the cursor in here and hit Control A. And then I'm going to hit Control C, which is the Windows command for copy. Now I've clicked over to my new character, and I'm going to hit Control V, which is a Windows command for copy and paste. So this will be the paste function. And it's that simple. You don't have to write these out unless you know what you're doing and you're familiar. There is a certain format to it, and that is what you really need to know. I actually have all this information here, but I want to go through the sheet first before we get into the formatting. But this is basically an easy, simpler way to modify anything that you need to look at. So if you're looking to just change things around a little bit, then so be it. That's a good way to do it instead of starting all over from scratch. Just use something as a template, copy and paste, do some modifications. It's pretty simple, a lot simpler doing it that way. If you build it from scratch, though, you're going to have to know all these little nuances of the parsing and what's recognized and what isn't, and the formatting of the text. And we'll get into that shortly. So now that we have this Yanvar, he's a little bit more customized to my game. Now is spells. So I don't really necessarily want the spells that he has right now. So the main thing is this spellcasting trait. As soon as you put spellcasting in the traits, Fantasy Grounds knows to look at this block and treat it as a spellcasting statement. So the statement is basically a way to differentiate between different casters. So I'm going to go ahead and make some notes here. So I'm going to open up the notepad, click this little green plus button, and this is going to be my spellcasting statement. Now this actually says the Acolyte is a first level spellcaster. Its spellcasting ability is Wisdom. So in parentheses, they have the spell save DC of 12 plus 4 to hit with spell attacks. Then it says the Acolyte has the following spells prepared, and there's a semicolon after there. And there's a line for each level. So there's the cantrips, and then there's a first level. So what I'm going to do is copy and paste all this data over to the statement area. And this will vary depending on the spellcaster. So if it says the Wizard is a second level spellcaster, its spellcasting ability is Intelligence or whatever it is. That's the important part of this statement. It has to be exactly like this too. So I'm going to hit Control A to copy all this data. And then I'm going to paste it over here. And this is the spellcasting statement. Now, you cannot come in here and just remove one of these and replace it with another spell. There's an actual procedure for this. So I'm going to leave the trait, but I'm going to delete everything in the spellcasting statement on the character sheet. I have it saved over here in my notes. So I've deleted all the spells in the jargon in here, all this stuff. And then you have to come down and actually remove the spells. And the reason for this is if you don't, Fantasy Grounds won't look up the new spell list. So basically what you're doing is you're providing it a trigger that says spellcasting. You're giving it the parameters, And now, if you remove all the spells, it forces Fantasy Grounds to look up the spells and repopulate. If you don't do it that way, it's not going to change anything. All you're going to be doing is deleting the spells. So you want to make sure you get rid of the spellcasting statement and the spells themselves first. And I know this is a roundabout way, but it's the way you have to do it. It's just how the Fantasy Grounds works. So now I'm going to lock this NPC. And I went ahead and bookmarked it in case. Now I'm going to bring it back up. Now it's completely empty. There's no spellcasting stuff whatsoever. I'm going to unlock it. I did leave the trait, but I got rid of the spells and the statement. So now if I want to change this, instead of Bless, Cure Wounds, and Sanctuary, maybe I want, let's see, what do these guys get? Let's see. So now the settings for these banners is in the settings area instead of in the library. And then you go to sidebar, and I want to bring out the spells. It was already there. Open this up. I'm going to filter this to the SRD. And then I'm going to change the source to Cleric. And then I'm going to go to level 1. I'm okay with his cantrips. Okay, we have Bane, Bless, Cure Wounds, Sanctuary. I want Guiding Bolt. So all I'm going to do here is substitute Sanctuary for Guiding Bolt. These little commas and parentheses and all these little punctuations are important. So the spells have to be divided by a comma, and they have to be spelled correctly. The case in this particular example is not as important. In some syntax it is, so it takes a while to get used to knowing which should be capitalized and what shouldn't. But in this case, I went ahead and added Guiding Bolt instead of Sanctuary. So I'm just going to go ahead and lock this for right now, but I want to make sure I copy and paste it first. So I'm highlighting all this text, and I'm going to paste it back onto this stat block. So it won't do anything yet until I close the character sheet. Once I do that, it will re-trigger and add the spells. So I'm going to lock it. I'm going to close the actual NPC stat block. And with my shortcut, I'll bring it back up. And there we go. So it actually looked all the spells back up and added them. And now they are part of his spell list. So Guiding Bolt is right here. So that's how you change out spells in Fantasy, at least for 5th edition. I don't know about the other rule sets for sure, but I'm sure it's some kind of process that's similar. So that is a spellcasting statement. That is important to learn what that is and how it works if you're working with spellcasters. And the other thing is automating effects on PCs. Pretty much all you're going to be doing is adding a statement that will parse out as an action or a trait. And if there's the correct language in there, or the correct spellings, or the correct phrasing, it will parse as an action so that when you add it to the combat tracker, that particular roll, or it could be a save or an attack roll or whatever it is, can be applied much easier than doing it manually. So you can add custom traits and actions to your character. You just have to, or your NPC, you just have to know what the syntax is, and we're going to get into that shortly here. So these are just some real basic steps, some raw basics to help you learn how to edit or create your own stat blocks. So this is my example over here. So if I wanted to change this out, I can copy and paste a lot of the stuff over and change it as I go. And then I would lock this, close it, bring it back up, and any changes that I made will be affected, especially for spells and such. So that's what you want to do with that. So Yanvar, the healer, is going to be my example, I guess. So now that he's done, I'm going to lock him. We're going to call it good. And there's one other thing I wanted to show you, which is the Other tab. So this has some lore on here, but you can put alternate higher or lower level variations of the same guy. So you can make him a couple other times, make him at higher levels, so he has more hit points and such. So you can link those. You put your lore or your background. You can link tables here or a loot, or you can have some dialogue that you set up ahead of time so that when he speaks, you have something ready. So there's a lot of things you can do on this backside of the character sheet. And also you would link your artwork if you had any artwork. That can also be linked here. So that's important to know this stuff. And like I said, the challenge rating, the XP, you're going to have to calculate that outside of Fantasy Grounds. And like I said, there's a lot of online sources that you can go to. I know there's generators and different things. And on our Fantasy Grounds College website, we do have an article or a blog that points out to a lot of those resources. But other than that, everything is pretty much done in Fantasy Grounds, except for maybe the artwork. You might have to edit it a little bit before you import it, and same with the tokens. But everything else should be pretty much in here, or you're going to be creating it. So that's basically the real basics of a particular build for NPCs and such. The next thing I'm going to do is take a look at the actual syntax of the different sections of this particular NPC. So there are text editors out there that you might need to employ for Fantasy Grounds. I suggest that you learn to use these. There's a couple that I listed here. There's Notepad+, which is free. That's what most people use. And then there's a Sublime Text, which is like $80, and it's more professional. It's for like programmers and such, but they both work similarly. This one just has a few more features and it's supported. You get you get live support, whereas this one you have to figure it out on your own. It's open license. So this one here would be used for editing text. So if you're going to do any conversions or anything that's robust over a lot of text, it's a good idea to get a text editor. For most cases in NPCs, you won't need it, but it's handy to have them so you can strip out unnecessary spacing and weird characters and that sort of thing. So this is just a little tip. Get used to using text editors if you're going to do a lot of work in Fantasy Grounds. It's important to have these, and what this does is it comes in handy when it comes to writing these spell casting statements. You can actually store it on here so it's ready to go, and all you have to do is swap out the different titles. So I have a template for wizards. I have a template for charisma. I have a template for whatever stat it's based on. So I have one for wisdom, I have one for charisma, and I have one for intelligence. So that's basically the template that I have for the spell casting. And then I just substitute out the spells, and I kind of use it as like a template, and it makes it a lot quicker than having to copy and paste it every time. So I'll have in my notes, I'll have like a template for each one. So that's something that you may want to look at if you're going to do a lot of NPCs. So the next thing is I'm going to go over some of these areas here in more in depth with in regards to the actual syntax. So in Fantasy Grounds College and floating around online, there's a bunch of guides for these. I just imported them into Fantasy Grounds, make it more convenient for me. And when I'm finished with this, I'm going to make it very comprehensive and turn it into a module. So maybe if people are working in Fantasy Grounds, you don't have to keep going between a PDF and outside of Fantasy Grounds. You can work inside. That's kind of why I did this, for the sake of the lesson, but also for convenience for me. Otherwise, I'd be going back and forth between a PDF and this, and it'd drive you nuts. So anyways, I have a bunch of story links here, and I'm going to go through these. I don't want to get all monotone and blah, 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 but there are different things that you need to know about that pertain to Fantasy Grounds. So the first is weapon attacks. That's the first on the list. There are links to the Atlassian that basically takes you to that wiki link that takes you right to where all this formatting is. It has all the different examples of the types of weapon attacks. And there's statements here and examples of how they should be written. Now, these do not have the actual damage for each weapon, but you have the template. It'll have a substitution like X or N, which would be a number. X would be a variable. So they have all of the different examples here. So this weapon attacks actually goes over to here on this graphic here. So if you go to actions, this is where the weapon attacks would be. So I just drag and drop this link right onto the graphic so that when people use this module, if you have this set right and you want to bring that up, there it is. So that's a way to kind of link things together. And then this whole entire index, I'm actually going to put that right up here in the corner. So if you want to bring up the index, it's right there. And then for saves, NPC saves, same thing. You have this format of saving throws. There's a link to the Atlassian that I put here. And then there's the actual formatting that shows you the exact way to type it out. And it gives you a description of what it is. So again, I'm going to drag and drop this in the appropriate area. So this is for saving throws. So when you're doing your saves, that's the area, and this will pop up to what you need to read or a direct link to an online Atlassian article. So I just copied all this information from the article to make it more convenient. But if you're not convinced or you want to look something else up, there's a direct link to it. So the next thing on here is conditions. So conditions are usually an effect of some sort or some kind of power, and they can either be applied against you or you might have an action that someone will have to make a saving throw. So for example, the saving throw would be like the target must make a DC, whatever, let's say it's poison. So constitution check, so maybe a DC 11 or 12 con check. With a saving throw, or on half or on a failure, the target is, and in this case, probably poisoned or paralyzed or whatever it does. So the phraseology works for all conditions except for prone, and that requires you to say knocked instead of the target is knocked prone instead of saying the target is prone. So you have to say knocked in that sentence. So more than one condition can be specified in the phrase and can usually be joined with and. So for example, the target is grappled and restrained. So you can have both in this case. And then there's a link to the conditions. So the conditions pretty much come down to this condition immunity, or it can be applied against your character on the combat tracker. So I'm going to go ahead and pin that there, even though it's not really, the actual thing, but this is close to what you're looking for. So the next thing is, let's see, we got conditions. We already did that. Ongoing damage. So in some cases, you'll have an effect or some sort of power that will deliver ongoing damage. So that would be probably in one of your actions or your traits. I'm not sure where this would come up to play, but when you're creating an NPC and they have a function where they create a condition of ongoing damage, this is how you would write that. So that's an important thing to know, is all this formatting is very, very important. I can't show you the formatting very well without reinventing the wheel, so I'm just kind of going through these to give you an idea of what they are. Npc Immunities and Resistances. Again, that's down here. There's vulnerabilities, resistances, that sort of thing. If you have those, you'll probably take half damage or no damage. So I'm going to go ahead and just put this in the resistances area. Let's see, you have recharge. So if you have a breath weapon, in this case, it would probably be a trait or an action. So if you were had a breath weapon or some sort of dragon type NPC, or maybe a dragonborn NPC, you would need to have this recharge on there if there was such a thing. And it follows the attack with a recharge X. So whatever the recharge is, it's usually like on a 5 or a 6. The breath weapon will recharge, but it will say a D6 is equal or higher than X for the actions to be recharged. So the recharge would be part of a trait or an action. Healing, same thing. If you have regenerative or basic heals or death only on 0, that's a trait or a feature that some races have. So again, that would be more into the actions area. Now we have other traits. So magic resistance, magic weapons, recharge, which we kind of talked about. And then we talked about the magic resistance. And I think I'm going to take the recharge link here and add it to this text. I think it's convenient to have it right where it needs to go. So I'm going to take the text from the story entry and from recharge and put it down here. So that makes it more convenient, so you're not having to go back and forth. Okay, so the next thing, so this traits thing would probably come down into actions or traits. So here we go. So that's other traits. And number 6 was NPC traits. So that goes in there. Let's see. Next page. Okay, so this is just a direct link to the entire article. So that's what this is for. So basically, it covers some of this stuff, and then obviously the spell casting down here and innate spell casting is similar. They're both kind of a statement, so I would probably link this to here, to the spells area. And then, let's see, conditions, saves. Yeah, I think we're good. Yep, so that's basically what these pertain to. And then, like I said, I got these little handouts. This anatomy thing I made so that, you can get the idea of, you have your basic title, and then you have your main data up here, your secondary, your tertiary, you have your CR and XP, and then down here is your traits, which is expanded out to this area. So that's basically, and then you have your other tab, which is the on the side here. So that's basically the anatomy of a stat block. Now, stat blocks are not just creatures or NPCs. They're also traps or vehicles. So if you wanted to make a trap, you would just bring up a blank sheet, put the damage that it does on there, put it in an encounter, or put it on the link it on your map somewhere. And when you need it, you just bring it up and you drag the damage onto your characters or the saving throw. Makes it a lot simpler than having to do it manually. Vehicles can just be like the stat block for the vehicle itself. If the vehicle's complex, like a ship, what you can do is create all the different components of the ship, like the sails, the guns, those sort of things. This is covered in the Saltmarsh campaign, where they have rules for ships. And also they covered a little bit in the Avernus campaign setting for vehicles. So basically you'd have like the steering column, and the tires, and the body of the frame of the boat. Like could be a ship that has mast, oars, a helm, the weapons. So you basically you'd build all those components, and then you would put those in an encounter. And I'm going to go ahead and just really quick grab this, and I'm going to just make a quick encounter. So here's Yanvar, and I'll just use this NPC example as my second basically. So if I did 4 of those and 1 Yanvar here, and then I hit the refresh on the CR value and the XP, it'll put up the CR values being a little bit harder, and the XP would be a little bit higher, provided that these guys give you XP. This case, I should have probably put 10. But if I change this, now I'll have to go back and delete this and change it, because it won't reflect the changes yet. So now let me put 4. All right, so when you hit refresh, the challenge rating, and then you have the updated XP value. So basically, if you want to change the token at this level, let's say you didn't want the letter N, you go back to the assets, back to Bernardo's tokens, or these are barbarian tokens, excuse me. So I'll say the rest of these guys have this, or maybe they're girls, I don't know, but they have like a Warhammer. So instead of changing the NPC stat block up here, you can change the tokens at the encounter level, so it's a little less permanent. Of course, I need to unlock it too. There you go. So unlock it first. When I change the master token, which is on the left, it changes all the subtokens. So that's basically the anatomy of an NPC stat block. A lot of the wording you need to understand and learn how to use it. There are formulas and shortcuts on the forums. That's where I got most of this data, and also on the new Fantasy Grounds wiki, which is the Atlassian. So if you have any problems with NPCs, refer back to the video. There's some other ones out there. Zacchaeus did a really good job. So if you follow him, his name is Philip Gregg. On the he has his own channel on YouTube. He goes through the same stuff, even more in depth. But I gave this a breakdown, and when I'm done with this module, I'm going to make it available to community members. Right now, I'm still kind of tidying it up and linking things together and finding typing errors and those sort of things. But once I have this done, I'm going to export it as a module and make it more of a reference for people that want to build NPCs or modify. But the easiest way is to modify an existing one and make your own out of it, and that would entail making a copy of it. Or you can start from scratch, and if you know all the syntax and how it's supposed to go together, or you have a sample next to you, you can build your own. But it's really up to you how you want to do it. But hopefully this was helpful to you guys. It makes it pretty helpful to have this. Will it work for custom? Yeah, so not just any, though. I think building custom effects depends on what it does. So when you're building custom effects, you just have to know the wording and also how it applies to the rule set. It's mainly in the wording, and if the PC can handle it. There are conditions and effects that you can build on your own. I know that for the 5th edition rule set, Rob Tui's already built most of them. I mean, there's still probably a few more out there that need to be built. But if I go to my library and open up modules, I have purchased this. This is third party. So if you don't know how to write them properly, you can kind of dissect ones that are already out there or go onto the forum. So I'm going to go to conditions and effects. And this is the module called 5e conditions effects. I don't know if there's ones for other rule sets, but I'm going to go ahead and load that. And what that does is up here on the right of the interface, there's a little effects button. When you open this up, it's basically for those particular instances where you don't have the effect created, but you have all your conditions, which are basic, and they're part of the rule set, and they're baked in. However, if you have a NPC that's more like a character, this wording here and some of these is what you'd have to modify, or how you would have to put it in here. So if you wanted to do this brutal critical hit, okay, so Let me bring up that NPC. So I'll just pretend that this is one of his features. So I'd have to add this as an action because that's basically what it is. Or maybe you have it grants disadvantage or whatever. It just depends. But basically you would have these set up on your sheet as an action. So if I hit maybe more of a trait, it depends on what it is. But I'll try to add it as an action. So this one was called, let's see. Oh, there's Blessing of the Trickster. Okay, so let's go with Defensive Tactics. Let's do that. So normally on the combat tracker, let's bring that up. So if I drag this guy, Yanvar, to the combat tracker, you would apply these effects as needed. So if he had something called Colossus Slayer or Commander Strike, let's say, normally you just drag and drop that onto him, and when he makes his attack roll or whatever, then you would apply that to against these guys here. So if I go to the actual listing here and I come down, I have this Commander Strike roll. So this would have to be built into an action, in which I don't have anything. As you can see, it's blank. So I'm going to try to put the coding in there for that. So I'm going to copy this data. Oops, I made a copy. I didn't mean to do that. And this doesn't specify the damage type, so I'm not sure how this would work. But basically, this is what the types of things you'd have to put, and they'd have to look like these spells, basically. So you might have to create them as a spell. But anyway, so you lock the sheet, and see it didn't parse, and that's a problem. So this is what I mean. You have to have the correct wording. So this being applied to this character might help in some regards, but when you actually go to code this, it'd have to be something else. It'd have to look more like a weapon. So it'd have to be like, is it a melee or both? What is it? Is it force or what is the damage type? So you can't just overly just put this on here. So let me see something. But you can add custom effects once you understand what you're doing. So there's Commander Strike. Now when I lock this, see it's not parsing because it doesn't have an attack type. So you do have to know, like if it says damage edit, that means like DMG, you'd want to put 1D whatever and then maybe force or something like that. Let me see if that works. Yeah, see, it didn't work. But if you add this to the sheet here you type that manually or you drag and drop that on here, the effect works. So you'd have to set these up kind of like a spell, or you'd have to modify this so it would actually parse. Because right now it's just a note. It's not doing anything. So that's what I'm saying. You have to know the verbiage, the usage, and when it applies and when it doesn't. And that takes some time. There's no book or manual that says, okay, this is how everything works. You kind of have to experiment with it and see if it's going to actually work. So here's damage, 1d8 radiant. Okay, but it's also part of a spell. So let's see if this parses. And you do have to test these sometimes. You do have to put them on the combat tracker. So if you're building content, make sure that you put it on the combat tracker, because sometimes it won't work, it won't parse. So let me go to this. See, here's Commander Strike, but there's no syntax after it. So not like this attack, bludgeoning. So you have to build it kind of like an attack. It won't let you just bring over the condition. So that's just an example of some of the hoops you got to go through to get these completely coded. But you're never going to get an NPC to be exactly like a player character. It's just impossible. You'll get close. You can get about 90%. But if you use these as a guide or go onto the wiki or onto the forums, you can see examples of these around and figure out how you want to code that and how it's supposed to be worded. So if I was to redo this, I would unlock this and change it into more of an attack role. And if there was a save, I could put that in there too, instead of just an effect. So that's how this would have to be done. So this particular trait, no good. It didn't work. So you would have to have it phrased correctly. Yeah, you could do prone. Yeah, so that's right. That's right, exactly. Can you export a PC to the NPC list? No. They don't, they're totally different. There's no way to combine those. If you really want NPCs that are more like characters, there's already stuff out there that's built. For instance, I know Grim Press puts out a bunch of books that are NPCs, and basically what they are is templates. So if you don't want to reinvent the wheel and you want higher level spellcasters, he has stuff for that. And just take his stuff and use it in your campaigns and change it the way you want. It's so much simpler than trying to reinvent the wheel. He has 4 or 5 good modules that basically has different iterations and variations of spellcasters, so you're not stuck with the acolyte. You might have a high priest and a medium priest and a lower level priest. It makes it easier on you when you're playing. So those are really good. They're on the DM skill. They're not that expensive, and they're invaluable if you're a game master. So I'm not trying to sell his product necessarily, but I'm just saying, and for ease of use and for time, I mean, there's people that have already done most of the work for us, so you might as well use it. But to actually learn it line by line is going to take practice. You're going to know, what the parsing is about, like what characters and letters it accepts, and that's true of a character sheet too. So they are different. There's really no way you can export a PC to the NPC list. You would have to build that or recreate it, and vice versa. So that's one thing that's very time consuming, but that's just how it works. Hopefully that helps you guys. Is there any other questions before I go? I'm going to end the stream. I think I've been yammering enough. NPCs are kind of a big chunk to take on. Other than items, NPCs are probably the worst thing out of all. All the other things are not too bad to build. It's just NPCs are a lot of different things to take in consideration. Items are not hard. They're just very tedious because you have 4 or 5 different item types. And when you're entering items, it's just copy and paste and, filling out all the fields. There's no shortcut on those. Once they get the Fantasy module parser done, which is basically the remake of NPC Engineer, it will make this process faster, but you still have to know some of the syntax and such. But it makes it easier to see it, to fill it out without making mistakes. If you're interested, just look up Fantasy module parser. Now it's basically NPC Engineer taken over, and that's put out by Theodore and another person. They're building that third-party tool. Unfortunately, it only works for D&D 5e. But if you're into that, that's the way to go in the future once they get that done. I mean, they're constantly updating it, so I don't have the time or the patience to test it, so I'm going to stay out of it for a while. But anyways, we're going on an hour, so I'm going to end the stream, and I thank all of you for joining me. Hopefully this helps you in the future. This is Fantasy Grounds version 4.0.10. This is February 17th, 2021. So if you're looking at this 3 years from now and something doesn't look right, well, it's probably because we've moved on. Anyhow, take care, everybody.